sorry, Shannon.
All good.
But just again, in keeping youth and young adult engagement work, peer work at kind of an ongoing center focus of our weeks in all of the roles that we collectively hold, either with as community partners, as community members, as agencies, as state representatives. The Youth Power Hour was born from the idea of a wonderful group of young folks at Healthy Transitions and has been actualized into an ongoing series. This is a really special presentation for myself and a few other folks here. Janet has just done some incredible work and incredible research and is just an incredible human being all around. So without further ado, I would like to pass the mic to Janet, and really excited for our interactive activities. Like Sarah said, we are going to be using a Jamboard for part of it, so please check the link in the chat. If you have any questions, feel free to direct message Shannon, Sarah, or myself, and we can help navigate you to the Jamboard. This is going to be a really great learning moment for folks. I'm really excited, especially for individuals working in crisis system planning around peer work, who are really wanting to know more about peer work, or, you know, all of the wonderful things that are coming with this new peer movement. Again, I'm babbling, and so I will pass it over officially. Janet, take it away.
All right. Well, thanks for that introduction. My name is Janet Walker. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a professor at Portland State University and been working in the general area of trying to increase youth voice in mental health services and systems for probably 20 years at least. And I started out with research and wraparound, and my first work was trying to make sure that the young people, that their perspective was represented in wraparound, kind of branched out from there. And recently have been focused on working with young people on peer support. So I'm going to ask the others on the panel to introduce themselves briefly as well.
Hi, everyone. My name is Shannon. I use she or they pronouns, and I'm currently the Healthy Transitions Project Director. But when I first moved out to Oregon 6 years ago, I was helping with getting young people involved in both the Children's System Advisory Council and the Alliance to Prevent Suicide. And from there, I moved into doing peer support work for young people in Clackamas County, working in wraparound specifically. So I did that for a little over a year. And after that, I transitioned to working at Ufine, which is a peer-to-peer help support and crisis line for young folks. So I was doing a lot of mentoring and support of the teen volunteers who would work there. It's peer support that looks a little different than the traditional peer support that we talk about in this realm. However, there is quite a bit of overlap, and so yeah. I really like peer, I am really passionate about peer support just because as a young person, when I experienced mental health crisis, it was really hard to find people who had similar experiences at the time that could relate. And once I found that, there was a lot of healing and community there. And so, yeah, I believe it's really powerful.
I'll go next. Hey, I'm Nicobe Petronelli. I use she, they pronouns. I actually work here at OHA in the Office of Recovery and Resilience. I do a lot of youth engagement work. I'm also an operations and policy analyst, a community engagement analyst, and get to work really closely with this team. However, I began my journey in Oregon chapter of my life, starting out in youth crisis intervention. While I was writing my thesis, working the graveyard shift at an intake center, and really got to know a lot of young folks' stories that way. and noticed a lot of disparities between who was being brought in by the police and who wasn't, and resources out there. And these were youth that I was only able to interact with once and then not see again, unless they were brought in again. I then became a peer support specialist. I actually, as Shannon had moved on, I took Shannon's position, got to work with in Tri-County areas, but my final area of peer support resided in Multnomah County, where I was able to really deep dive into the importance of like culturally specific peer support, and also engage with wraparound teams and learn really what it was like to be a peer. I was very lucky to have a peer supervisor who had been a peer previously, which isn't always normal and the norm. I then went into youth coordination work. I worked with YYEA, a team of about 50 youth and young adults, to do advocacy work with CSAC, the Alliance, working on Senate Bill 52, working on assisting different OHA teams in getting youth feedback in crisis system planning, or kind of anything that needed youth feedback, finding really creative ways to engage youth in policymaking decisions from the beginning. And now I am here at OHA and still working with youth. So again, this is a really special process for me. And thank you, Janet, for including me when I was a peer and when I was working in policy. And even now, it really helped me feel less alone as a peer in my experience. And it was great to see how there was data to back up the experience that I was having. And a lot of times, until you have the language to describe your experience, it feels kind of like you're alone in it. So this is a really healing process as well. I'll popcorn over to Kendall.
Hi, my name is Kendall Burns. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the peer run respite coordinator. And I work in the Office of Recovery and Resilience. So I am also an operations and policy analyst, specializing in peer delivered services. And the way that I kind of intersect with this work is that part of my lived experience is actually being a youth in the system in Oregon, having experienced extreme systemic failure and abuse within those systems, and a lack of relevant services or responsive services. And as I have kind of like overcome these different intergenerational barriers and systemic barriers, such as the school to prison pipeline, and as I make my way through my undergraduate program and kind of break that barrier as well, and have now joined OHA, you know, I came into this work because of the lack, kind of the harm that was done and the lack of services. And so this is kind of one of those projects that I just was introduced to while doing youth recovery, substance use, peer services, and other advocacy work alongside Nakobe and others at Youth Era, Janet, through this study. And I, you know, just want to say thank you, Janet. These were wonderful spaces and very supportive spaces as I navigated a lot of spaces where I didn't have support at the time, and navigating social work, academia as a person leading with lived experience has also been quite the experience. So although we haven't really intersected in like the School of Social Work way, because I'm in the BSW program, it's been so comforting to know that there's at least one person who really is there advocating for peer services. And raising that awareness within social work. So thank you. And I'll popcorn over to who hasn't gone yet.
How about Sarah?
Hi all, my name is Sarah Rasmussen. I am the Healthy Transitions Youth and Young Adult Coordinator. I joined the team back in November, and though I'm not on the panel today, I did some of the prep work for it and for some of the other Youth Power Hour panels. And I've just been so delighted to see and learn from everyone that has presented, everyone that has posed questions. Yeah, my background is in youth mentorship and youth suicide prevention work, and I'm excited to be here. And I think we still have Michael and Alex.
Yep.
Michael, do you want to go?
Sure, yeah, thank you. Hi, my name is Michael Haynes. Pronouns are he, him, and I currently work as a supported employment and education specialist with the ESA program in Lane County, but prior to this, I worked as a peer support for like 7 years, and then I had the opportunity to also work as a peer support supervisor, and I just feel so passionate about the importance of peer support, and I'm grateful to have been able to participate with this project.
And Alex, I think you're the final person.
Hi everyone, can you see and hear me okay? My internet's been a little touch and go, but seeing some thumbs up, great. Well, I just want to say hi, my name's Alex Friedman, use they, them pronouns. And I was a research assistant on this project, on this team that I feel like is really meaningful for me in my time at Portland State University, where I had done a lot of work prior to that in the peer support environment and working with young people, especially young people who were involved in the carceral system, in the foster care system, other system involved youth, and just really feeling like I wanted to see connection between the work that was being done in those academic environments and the work that I had seen in the lives that people were living, their real lived experience for young people here in Oregon. And I feel like the work that I got to do with Janet and Shannon and Jacoby and the other folks on this team has been really, really meaningful to me. And now I've transitioned over to working at Oregon Health Authority in their equity and inclusion division, where I work as a health equity policy analyst. And I feel like that time, both with direct service, working with young people as a peer advocate and support person, and also in research, really informs the work that I do every day in thinking about people's lived experience and the impact that it has on people's real lives. And I think that all the work that we do on that macro level has to have that micro connection. So I just feel really grateful all the people that I got to talk to in the research, and like those stories they really impacted me, and they're still with me every day. So anyways, it's just really awesome to get to connect with this project again, even though I'm working for OHA now. But I also still work for the School of Social Work at Portland State University. I teach now there. So it's still a passion for me to be connected to that environment too, to try and inspire that next generation of social workers to really have that connection between that macro level and that micro level, and just people and real experiences. So, yeah, we did that. Thanks, everybody.
All right, so just a quick preview of why isn't it going? Let's try that. Nope. Okay, what we're going to do today, I'm going to talk specifically about one of a series of projects that we did as, at least in part of the Healthy Transitions Initiative in Oregon, which is a 5-year project. It's about to end, but the overall goal of the project is to, improve outcomes for older youth and young adults within the state who experience serious mental health conditions. So this particular project, where we're going to talk about how did we sort of come to see this as something that was important. We'll just sort of talk a little bit about the theory of change, which is actually a lot more interesting than it sounds as theory of change. Then talk a little bit about what our research said about the skills that are important for peer support specialist roles. We use that peer support specialist as the terminology. It's just what we settled on. So we have PSS for peer support specialist, PSU for peer support user, just if you see that, and if we say it going forward. And then we're going to talk about challenges in the larger context and what does it take to kind of ensure that peer support specialists are able to carry out this role in a way that works, not only for the users of peer support, but also for the peer support specialists themselves, because it can be a very stressful job and is unfortunately kind of often not that well supported in the larger organizational context. So, oh, and I did want to say that it's so great. We have like a little reunion going here because the project I think has almost been going for 2.5 years. And so we've had turnover in our project staff as well as, I guess, turnover among young people who are kind of available or engaged with the work. So this is kind of a representative group in that there's some people who are there at the beginning, some people more at the end, some people in between. And yeah, so it's really nice to see everybody. So I believe that now we were going to just ask the panel to talk a little bit about why something like this would be useful or important. And I think we're just going to let people chime in. I don't know, would it be better to call on people? I'm going to call on Michael because I know that he was telling me he's prepared. So let him start and let other people jump in as they see fit.
I don't know how prepared I am, but I appreciate you calling on people because I have a hard time interjecting myself. I think it's important to clarify roles and skills because, like you said, it's still something that is being implemented. When I first started as a peer support here at Peace Health, I was the only peer support in an organization of like 20,000 people. So I didn't know what that guy was supposed to do. Nobody else knew what the heck I was supposed to do, and I was completely alone. And so I just think that having this clarity is important because it can make it so that people can be successful and not burn out, that the people around them who they're working with can know what they're supposed to do and not lead them down the wrong path.
Yeah, good. Nicole, I will call on you.
Yeah, I was gonna say, there are some folks from our team and the ORR, and we're all peer support specialists as well. So they might have some experiences as well, but role clarification and skills. Again, I was really lucky that I had a peer supervisor who not only had been a peer for I think she had been a peer for about 4 to 6 years in my exact role, and was also a queer woman of color like myself. As a supervisor was really helpful because she had like created the peer trainings. She knew how to utilize the tools. She had seen it all and been there and like partnered me with another like very seasoned youth peer support specialist to walk me along the way. But one thing that was really kind of hard for me was that I knew exactly what I was doing as a peer, but engaging with clinicians or engaging with like other wraparound team members or other quote unquote professionals was really difficult because although I understood my role, they didn't understand my role. And I think a lot of youth peer support specialists are often seen as glorified babysitters or non-professionals or folks with lived experience and experience that specific stigma, which is really interesting because while I was a youth peer support, I was also writing a research thesis. And so seeing how kind of that hierarchical kind of value system that is based in stigma affected how I had to advocate for my role was was kind of what really championed me to say, hey, we need role clarification. And when I was able to meet other youth peers who didn't have a supervisor the way that I did, they were like, I'm not sure what to do. My supervisor doesn't know what I'm here to do. And then interacting with other folks was difficult. So I think it's extremely important to clarify the role. I think it's extremely important to identify that there are specific skills and needs and support that come with it, especially when you're working with specific populations throughout the state. And my thoughts based on my experience in Oregon, I'm a California native. And again, I was a peer supporter, I feel like a million years ago, but it wasn't actually a million years ago. It was just pre-2020. But working as an African-American queer peer support specialist, prior to working specifically in Multnomah County and some other counties, I definitely navigated not only supporting youth, but having bias not just be about lived experience, but being about race and gender and like sexuality stuff. And so I think that was my first real experience of like blatant racism in Oregon, which I again, I'm lucky that I had a supervisor that I did that really understood and helped me navigate it and put me in a safer position. I also experienced a beautiful moment of working as a peer support with a culturally specific team to wrap around a youth who, again, shared very similar lived experience and cultural kind of identities to myself. And we were able to help DHS build their first culturally very full team, culturally specific wraparound team, and watch this young person succeed. And that was beautiful. So I'll leave that there and see if anybody else has anything to say.
I just very quickly, I think it's important to have this role clarity, because being a peer support is already a hard job. You are using your personal lived experience with these hard topics in order to support someone who's currently going through it. That's a lot of emotional labor. And then we have to add on top of it, explaining what your job is over and over and over again to people in the community. It's exhausting.
I'd like to say, I've coined a new term, and I think it's actually taken off in the School of Social Work, and I've realized that it's a ripple effect I'm seeing now. So I'm going to keep using it. It's called institutional gaslighting. And that is what it's like being a peer support a lot of the time. When you have to come in, role clarity is so important. I can't tell you how many times I have had a clinician come over and tell me how I needed to do my job, that I needed to direct people in a certain way and tell them what they needed to do for their recovery. You know, that I needed to push people into 12-step meetings. And I was like, let me clarify my role. And I've left multiple clinical agencies because I knew what my role was, but my employer did not. And it requires kind of a meta conversation about like the historical roots and the value systems that Nakobe so eloquently touched upon. So thanks. I see Bo.
To go. They want to.
Yeah. Yeah, so I don't know. I'll check with them to see if we could do another time. I don't know what happened to Wednesday.
Hello?
Yeah, though it's on you. Sorry, I think somebody was unmuted.
Strange. Is my camera on too?
Yep.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, that was strange for a second. I thought I'd jumped into a different meeting, but yeah, I don't know. I was just thinking about the questions, and I'm a descendant of the Klamath tribes, and my dad was from Peru, and person with lived experience. And I know that, you know, throughout my peer support work, and then also really recently in our Office of Recovery and Resilience at OHA, we've been having to utilize resilience. And for me, even outside of work and also in my role, resilience comes from identity and cultural identity. And so what this means is, you know, for me, a lot of times what resilience means referring back to historical survival, historical success, historical, you know, historical context, and it means referring back to who I am. And so, and especially, you know, I think what I've experienced in Oregon a lot, especially being a person with lived experience, is that a lot of times folks assume they want to hear about what my lived experience was and what the trauma of it was. So they want to hear about what my negative impacts of my lived experience, you know, what was it like being an addict? You know, what was it like having a mental health experience? You know, what was it like experiencing a different reality? They might not say it as nice as that, but they want to know what my negative experience was. But being a person with lived experience and advocating, you know, what that actually means for me is identifying with my successful navigation of those things, and with my reconciliation of realities, and with my resilience as a human being. That's the part that gets missed when people are asking me to share about my lived experience, you know, they forget to ask about all the benefits of having lived experience, all the positive experiences I've had from having lived experience, all the compassion and wisdom and patience and value systems and all that kind of stuff that comes into it. And so when I'm clarifying my role, you know, for me, what I think about is, you know, my identity, clarifying my identity and grounding myself. Cause like what Kendall is speaking to, so much of the time, especially when people are asking me about my negative lived experience, I don't know if the word negative is right, but that, you know, the impacts, you know, of my lived experience, when people are asking me about that, they are a lot of times they're not acknowledging the reality of they're not acknowledging my reality, and that happens a lot, you know, where my reality isn't being acknowledged or considered, and you know, and I'm being told something different is happening than it actually is. The other thing too is what I experienced in my peer work a lot was called the dustpan phenomena, where just kind of all the jobs that nobody wanted to do in the agency, they just, you know, give it to the peer. And if I have clarity around my role, my identity as a peer, my identity as a person with lived experience, you know, there's a sense of advocacy there where I can say, not my job, like the Mac Dre song. So that's it.
Kendall, did you want to add something?
Yeah, I was just gonna say that's how I have my CADC, Bo. That dustpan phenomenon. Yeah. How I got my CADC one essentially.
I was gonna say, so Mac Dre gave you your CADC? That's pretty
No,
cool.
that would be even cooler. I wish like I would have framed the certificate. No, but I just wanted to follow up based on kind of my experiences in Oregon, which I kind of to follow up on the second question, I addressed in kind of the introduction, some of those experiences that kind of brought me into the work, the challenging experiences in life. And I also just want to name what an absolute honor it is to walk alongside you know, folks on the HT team, Janet Walker, folks in the School of Social Work, as well as the Office of Recovery and Resilience. The fact that, you know, 15 or so, it's probably more than that now, I'm dating myself, so like maybe more like 18 years now. Oh, wow. You know, 15 or so years, it's been that there's a huge, I'm just trying, sorry, I've lost my train of thought, but I'm just trying to speak to the amount of change that has happened in a span of 15 years. We went from no services. I was like put out kind of without a aftercare plan when I exited services after being institutionalized for a better part of my teenage years. And it's been an honor to work in this field, to see the healing and be a part of the healing of my community in so many ways with youth and folks across the lifespan. And now to have the honor to be at a macro level and really elevate the voice of lived experience and youth, especially. It is an absolute honor and privilege. So thank you.
Thank you, Kendall, and thank you, Bo, and thank you, everyone. Janet, back to you.
Yes, well, I agree. Thanks to everyone. Let me see if I can make the
The
slide go.
importance of your work.
Make the slide go forward. Why is it only going sometimes? I don't understand. There we go. All right. So, you know, every time I've asked people to talk about their experiences in peer support, a lot of these same issues come up, and they're the issues that have been recognized increasingly now in the published literature. And that runs the gamut from sort of formal qualitative exploration as to what is the experience of peer support, kind of like what we're going to be talking about today. But also, you know, a huge piece of this is with peer support getting more and more attention. There's the idea of, well, where's the research that shows that peer support works? And all of the summaries, literature reviews, meta-analyses, et cetera, that focus on the research on peer support, they all kind of end up with this, well, you know, we have some research, but the problem really is that the role isn't well defined in most cases, because if we don't really know what people are doing, we don't really know what's supposed to happen as a result. And I think that also, as people that we just heard from, as everyone was sort of attesting to, and of course it varies from place to place, but there's an awful lot of confusion out there about what peer supports are supposed to do, what they're not supposed to do. Every time you talk to people, they're like, oh, well, they made me do, you know, all I did was drive people around. All I did was case management. All I did was sign people up for food stamps. You know, so there's just a lot of that. And I think that also when the role is misunderstood, there's just a lot of friction, and also young people left to define the role on their own, they become very dedicated to the young adults or the youth that they're working with. And that in and of itself can be very stressful, because they can be the sort of first line of the first call, the first person that young person will be in touch with. And that can be a very stressful position if you don't have support around your boundaries, if you don't know who's backing you up, like under which circumstances do you need to get some backup under, you know, and things like that. So, you know, part of it too is just about protecting the young people who are in these roles and making sure that their recovery is not jeopardized by their job. So that is kind of like what the context is of our work. I just don't know. Oh, there we go. So what is the theory of change? So this project is generally around this area of theory of change. So what we want to do is create a theory, so testable hypotheses about a role. So first of all, we wanted to define the role. So what do peer support specialists do? And how do we know when their practice is good enough? What does skilled practice look like? So those are defining the role. And then the second piece behind that is to say, well, as when they do the role well, what outcomes do we expect and why? Why is there some good rationale for thinking that these will occur? So that's where the kind of the chain of logic comes in for the theory of change. So just briefly, we had two actual separate projects that I was working on that kind of came together to work on this. So there's the Healthy Transitions Project that is here in Oregon. And that what we'll see another little kind of abbreviation that we settled on for that is most of the programs were so-called non-diagnosis specific. So a lot of them were wraparound programs, but other ones that were serving young people with pretty high levels of mental health needs. And then we also had another project that was focused specifically on peer support in first episode psychosis programs or coordinated specialty care, whatever, of which ESA is the one in Oregon that you may be familiar with. So both projects have regular staff on them who have experience with as a peer support specialist, and in some cases also peer support specialist supervision. And so we wanted to do a qualitative project where we invited young adults who had experience in peer support, and that was either providing peer support, and we also had young people who had been peer support users, as we're calling them. And after we created a pool of young people who were interested in being in part of the project and offering their perspectives, we invited them to be in a series of small group discussions. That the average size of the group was 3 people. Sometimes we had as many as 4 or 5, and on 2 occasions we only had 1 due to no-shows. But we engaged, for the peer support specialists, we engaged them over 3 rounds of discussions. So we had several small group discussions, then the research staff would go and do some data analysis, and then we'd invite them back for another one where we'd say, this is what we found, can you help us clarify these things? And then we did that again for a total of 3 times. And let's see, specifically, this is what we had. So, we basically started out, and I remember the very first one using a Jamboard, because it was Nakobe's suggestion to think about what is it that peer support specialists do, what are the outcomes we expect, et cetera. And then just basically we would have things like in the beginning, peer support specialists are to help their young people feel seen, heard, and understood. So our typical process was just going in to unpack and understand, what does it mean to be seen, heard, and understood? What does that look like? How can you tell? And so there was just a lot of that unpacking. We also heard things about hope and empowerment, and we spent lots of time just talking about, what does hope look like? What does it mean? Tell us about when you experienced hope. Same thing with empowerment. And then after we had kind of put the basics of the theory together, we ran a final round of groups with peer support users who really did validate a lot of what we had found. And also they contributed, I would say a fair number of them had some good experiences and some not so good experience in peer support. So it was actually really helpful to hear about when peer support kind of didn't work out in some cases, because that was helpful as well. So we had a total of 52 participants, 35 peer support specialists. You can see there the breakdown between FEP and the non-diagnosis specific, 17 peer support users, and then there's a little bit of information about the demographics. We held a total of 24 groups. Our analysis was something called reflexive thematic analysis, which I'm not really going to talk about. And we actually have our first journal article in press now that is coming out of this work, and a second one that's in preparation. And I just wanted to ask our young people who are on the panel, who were part of that process, to maybe talk a little bit about what it was like to be in there. So I know Nakobe and Kendall and Michael were all part of that. So I'm going to call on Kendall because I can see her there. So
Yeah, hi. Well, like I said earlier, it was a very supportive process. And one of the things that I really enjoyed this, specifically at the time I was taking classes with Ben Anderson Nathy in the Child, Youth and Family program. And it's just been a treat to not only engage with social workers and other peers around kind of the nuance of youth, right? Of youth specific work and how that varies and what those considerations are, what that means for different communities across the states. And again, just really central to it is identity, right? And so it was just a very safe place to engage in, but I'll let others kind of share their experiences. I'll admit that junior year for me was also quite the whirlwind. So yeah, I'm curious to know what others have to share.
I thought it was amazing. Like, I know when I first started, I was like coming to the end of my like peer support role and moving more into youth coordination. But for the first time ever, I had felt seen and heard in kind of the struggles that I was going through, not just in my like professional world, like of being an actual peer, but acknowledging like, okay, what is it that I do? And how do I know if this is working? But how do I know that like I am also well in my role? And what was very interesting is that a lot of the peers who are in this space, and it was a diverse group of peers, and even like bringing in more folks, like I know once I like transitioned out of working in the group more hands-on, that there were other folks from my agency who would go in and say, wow, like I look forward to this meeting, it's really healing. But also like being able to, while we're talking about the work that we're doing with youth or the frustrations that we have, or almost like consulting one another in what our experiences are, it's like randomly someone would say, what does your health insurance plan look like? Like, are you able to afford your own mental health care when you're going through this trauma? It was kind of like peers providing peer support to one another while talking about how we are supporting the young people that we're working with and the importance of that. And so I think, I know our team has said like that connection that peers bring, not only did I find that we bring that to our youth and conversations around this, but like Janet, you really fostered an environment where we were able to peer each other while talking about these specific terms, like unpacking, seen, heard, and understood, and really seeing that as the youth who we're working with feeling seen, heard, and understood in the systems they were navigating, as well as us feeling seen, heard, and understood in the systems we're navigating alongside them with lived experience in those systems. And then also thinking, oh wait, like I'm doing this work and I'm working with this team to ensure that these young people are getting the best possible care, and I can't afford a therapist. So how am I taking care of my own mental health while we're working through some heavy situations? I think talking about being the first person that a youth will call in a really scary situation. I mean, I don't know one youth peer support who hasn't been kept up at night by one specific youth that they work with, or had a moment where it's like, oh my gosh, this is this is a really dangerous situation. How are we going to navigate this space? And then how are we going to, as peers, decompress? And then how are we going to later down the road be able to save up to afford to speak to a therapist about this experience? And so that was really phenomenal. But it was like, it was connecting not only, like I said, the experience of being a peer, of the work that we do as peers, but also conversations would bloom from that around what as peers do we need to be well so that we can provide the best source of peer connection, peer services, and so that we could walk alongside youth, not with crutches, but like fully with our 2 feet on the ground saying, all right, let's do this together.
I think I would echo a little bit of what Nicobia was saying. It really felt validating to my experience as a peer support specialist. And, you know, those were kinds of conversations that I really hadn't had a chance to have with people before. So it was nice to be more thoughtful about, you know, the approach to the work that I'm doing and how I'm trying to support myself and how, you know, things that I do to support folks and, you know, what's important to participants. And it really helped me, yeah, like I said, just reflect on what was important to me and, yeah, just think about the work that I was doing. And then just to have all of those kinds of like challenges and things laid out in front of me, you know, it made it so that I could walk away from that experience and say, here are things that I can really work on, or here are things I know I'm doing really well in. And so it helped me just feel more confident and better as a peer support person as well.
Okay, thanks, you guys. So I'm realizing that we are a little short on time for the amount of content that we have left. So
We could go as long as you would like if folks need to jump off, by the way. This is such a relaxed environment that if folks need to jump off at 4:30, please feel free to jump off, or 5:30, please feel free to jump off, but it is totally up to you as to how long you want to present, because.
all right, well, I don't want to belabor this, and Nicole, maybe you can help me out here. So this sort of finding of the theory of change is described in the article that we have, it's about to be published. And we do have a draft of that article that people can get. And I don't know how to, if Nicole, if you can distribute that or not, or I can give it to you. And we have the other document we'll be talking about as well that people may be interested in taking a look at. So basically, this is a kind of a summary of what we came up with. And I'm not going to read every single thing on here. We are going to talk about the skills in a bit. But basically, what makes this different is that, yes, it's important to have, so if you look at the left, so the idea is that the peer support specialist promotes the development of a certain kind of relationship that we call a peerness-based relationship. And that is sort of necessary for other outcomes to happen. And so rather than saying it's necessary to have this aspect of identity in common or this aspect of identity in common, it's about whether you can use your identity in all of its facets and a specific interpersonal approach. You can see that's the second bullet in that leftmost box. If you can kind of combine those to promote the emergence of what we call this peerness-based relationship. And just to say that in most cases, people thought it was important to have a shared experience of being having a serious mental health condition, having experience in systems and services and so on, and also to be part of a similar age cohort. People thought that was super important. But there are many, many other potentially important aspects of identity that could play into this as well. And so really it was more about bringing your whole self in a certain way, and the development of a relationship where the the person who's being supported feels that their peer support specialist has relevant lived experience and that enables them to understand them well. And often it's in a really unique way, certainly compared to other people in the mental health services context. That the peer support specialist is a safe and non-judgmental person to trust with sensitive topics and information, and that the peer support specialist is a credible source of information and ideas, including options for coping and wellness, and also for how to make treatment work with life. And then also being a credible example of someone making a life while also managing challenges. And then you can see on the far right, again, assuming that this relationship happens, that it contributes to increased hope, decrease what I would call existential loneliness, like this feeling, even if it's not even if there's evidence to the contrary, this feeling that you're just so alone in what you're going through. And you can see the other outcomes as well: increased personal agency and empowerment, and then taking action as desired from the peer support users to do things to meet their own personal goals, and also to communicate with other people around them about their priorities and perspectives and what's going to work for them kind of mental health wise and treatment wise as well. And I just want to say that this is a peer support role. I mean, there are other peer support interventions. There's group work. There's all sorts of different things that peer support specialists do. But within our group, we found a very high level of context of consensus about this particular kind of a role. It was sort of open-ended, one-on-one, sort of generally empowerment-oriented peer support with a heavy emphasis on sort of empathic listening. And so I guess I just want to turn to the panel to give their reflections on this a little, if anybody wants to raise their hand or go ahead.
I know I've talked a lot. I'll go really, really quickly for the sake of time, but the increased hope and decreased existential loneliness, that was a positive outcome that I saw in my work as a peer. And it came from, again, having that relevant lived experience, similar backgrounds. Again, this is with the culturally specific youth, working with young folks who are navigating the system while Black, understanding the difference between being and what I had experienced as a young person, what is a mental health trauma response versus, or mental health issue versus a behavioral issue, and which young folks get which specific type of treatment, and when that treatment arises, to be able to A, have somebody there to advocate for you, B, have somebody there who understands, and C, if it goes the way that oftentimes I would find the system would go, saying, hey, this is messed up and this isn't your fault, and there will be ways one day to make sure that if what you are really needing is mental health like care, you're not being sent to jail. Whereas somebody who may not be a young Black person in Oregon receiving mental health care instead of jail as an opportunity. And so that hope and that personal agency and being able to see youth at juvenile court advocate for that based on their understanding of history, the tools that you develop through being a peer, but also those tools that you are really like working alongside youth to develop, and seeing them advocate for themselves in spaces like juvenile court, which have caused so many moments of harm and trauma for young folks in that community. And so those community-based activities, that understanding of system navigation, but also that genuine understanding of, hey, look, I've been there, I've seen it, I've walked with you through this, and regardless of the outcome, like, you're gonna be all right, and things will be okay, and we will still be here no matter what. And seeing how that changes a young person who may have experienced so much inconsistency, or is system wary, or doesn't have any trust in their case manager or in the system itself, really be able to see what stability looks like, and also see, hey, like, you made it through this, like, I'm going to make through this, and you advocate, and I'm going to start advocating too. And it takes a lot to go from a young person who might not talk at all to working over time, and then seeing them speak in front of court. And so I really, this model I've seen work, and these areas of focus I've seen work, and I've seen success in young folks that I've worked with because of this. And so that's kind of my perspective. It's why I do the work I do.
Well, I guess I'll go next. I've been trying to form my thoughts and put it together in a way that makes sense. So I'll try my best. I think in reflecting on these things, one thing that stands out to me is just like the importance of vulnerability and a peer support specialist, and that peer-to-space relationship I think can come from that vulnerability and that ability to connect with folks that someone who maybe has done a lot of schooling and has knowledge in an area might not be able to relate in the same way. And I know for me, in my experience, one thing I wanted to do was, for a long time, feel normal. And then I realized that I didn't want to feel I just didn't want to feel abnormal. So when I was able to make that connection with other people and share that experience and help people find what it was for them that, that not wanting to be abnormal and just connecting with folks, using that vulnerability made a big difference.
Completely. Yeah, that I think when I was a peer, I definitely wasn't talking in wraparound settings about my background, my academic background. I wasn't talking about my thesis. I wasn't talking about any of that. It was a space to be authentically myself and using the lived experience expertise that I had versus academic research, which I think is super important when it comes to working with young people. And also, it was an interesting process to be able to separate the two spaces in my brain and my life at the time, to really see how, I don't know, see what is expected of you as a person with working with a team or a group of folks, and a young person, without needing to rely on letters behind your name, and really relying on that connection and that vulnerability piece of support, which again was an interesting way and time to kind of navigate that role, for me personally. But the vulnerability and connection.
Sorry, I just want to add one thing really fast, Kendall. I saw you turned your microphone off. But I think what can add to the difficulty of that vulnerability is you're still, trying to not make it about yourself and about the person. And so balancing that line of like bringing yourself into the conversation, but not making it about you can be challenging. Go for Kendall.
Okay, well, I'm gonna talk in the meantime, and I just want to say that some of what we've been hearing just now, it represents some of the richness that we were hearing in our discussions. I mean, just the acute observations and the sort of checking in with the self about what young people, what our participants were saying in the research, like, how to talk about your experience without making it about you. How do you use your experience, and how do you not use your experience, and how do you avoid getting kind of pressured into using your experience in a way that that isn't helpful for you or maybe for anybody else either. And I think we had some examples of that earlier on. I do just want to say that all of this causality that's represented in this diagram is what emerged from the words of the participants. However, you can see in the italics down kind of toward the bottom, it's completely consistent with very well established theories about interpersonal communication and about change processes. So I did particularly want to just because I thought it was fascinating, draw a little attention to this one, that this non-judgmental empathic listening is something that is extremely powerful. And if you look at the research literature, it's possibly the most powerful component generalized across all psychotherapeutic modalities. And I think that sometimes this isn't really appreciated. I feel like, especially in my experience, as we've turned to evidence-based practice and things have gotten, more codified and more elaborate, that there's been this sort of need or from the field to go to ever fancier and more like specific things to do. But actually, the basic of non-judgmental empathic listening, that basic skill, is super important. And there were two interesting studies that happened, both with young adults. One was in an FEP program and one was in bipolar. And they used non-judgmental empathic listening versus a intervention that they were trying to develop as the control condition. They assumed it wouldn't do anything. And in both cases, it actually outperformed the intervention that they were trying out. So, sometimes I feel like people are unsure, like, why should this peer support, why should it even work, why should it be helpful? But to really just double down on these sort of essential pieces of the role, that is where it's at, and that is impactful. And I think it's just, I just want to just draw attention to that because I think it becomes clear to people who are doing the role that that's how it is.
And I want to add, Janet, that it feels funny to me that that's considered a modality, because it seems like that's just how people should approach conversations.
You mean all conversations? Yeah. All right. Well, let's see. So,
Kendall has something.
Oh, just really quick. I'm so sorry. I got a call I had to take urgently just for a second there, but I just want to say as well, kind of thinking just about all of perspective now, I think as well, kind of with this project, I've just realized, like, people are noting, like, oh, isn't this just something that should be like as a status quo? And I want to say that there are elements of peer support that are present in many cultures, and peer support isn't needed, and it's within those contexts potentially in other cultures because it's an inherent part of the culture. Whereas within our Western model, it's required kind of, and we're very separated. So peer support kind of works as like a glue that kind of brings us back and reminds us. For me, I think that I see peer support work not necessarily is not decolonization work, but I do see kind of things through the lens of history and colonization, and kind of applying that lens to it. While the research is incredible to support and like solidify this, I also just want to name that this is required to legitimize something kind of academically and professionally, but that we all know that our stories and our truths are valid with that. And I want to name that I felt that when working with the research team at PSU. So thank you.
So I saw that Nakobe put into the chat a link to the manuscript for the article, which I hope anybody who's curious about that will read. Please don't circulate that further because it hasn't been published yet. Whatever, that's what the publishers, they always tell you not to circulate it too much. But anyway, so just real quickly, when we came up with the skills area, like remember one of our questions was, what does it take to promote this fairness-based relationship, and what does skillful practice look like? And so we developed a list of 6 skill areas, and then we had sort of key points underneath each one, and I'll show you an example in just a minute. But we turned it back to our participating peer support specialists and asked them to rate to what extent is this a skill that's important for peer support? And also to give us suggestions about whether it needed to be changed or wordsmithed or whatever. But we also came up with a list of the main challenges. And I think like one of the ones that Michael kind of mentioned is how to talk about your experience in a way that isn't making it about you. And so I actually think that the challenges list is perhaps even more useful. It's one thing to say, oh, here are the skills, but it's another thing to say, well, look at these things. Like, have you been prepared, or if you're a supervisor or trainer, are you preparing your young people to handle these situations? And it's a pretty good list of challenging situations. And actually, we also had a separate thing. Again, you'll see an example in a minute of challenges in the larger context, like how do these things come out? Where are areas where organizations either support or fail to support young people, like to back them up, or whatever. You'll see in a second. So anyway, we had just real quickly, if I can get this to advance the way it should. I just don't understand why. Okay, so real quickly, you can see in this diagram, I hope it's clear, the blue and the orange are people that sort of voted that this is either extremely or very important in the skill area. So we had it for each, you can see skill 1.1, there was a series of statements under each skill. So you can see skill 1 had 7. That pretty much everybody's saying these are pretty dang important skills. And similarly for the challenges, these are the challenges in each area. A little bit more, there's like a couple people, there was even one person that said, oh, this isn't important, I can't remember what it was. But anyway, so that was how we kind of looked at the data, and then we revised the skills, and we came up with the skills of 6 key skill areas. So one was really understanding what the role is and is not. So being pretty clear about what it is and being able to express that to other people. The second one was this whole thing about how and when to draw on personal experience and how to recognize when you might be doing it, making it about you, or for other reasons, like people are pressuring you to talk about it in a certain way. So, so there's that. And then the basic one of drawing out and supporting, this is sort of the empowering kind of listening to making sure that you are focusing on what are their preferences, perspectives, and ideas. Providing empathy and validation, supporting motivation and activity, and then supporting personal agency and empowerment. And here we have an example. Oops, I forgot to advance this one. An example of one of the pages we have. So each one is kind of now on its own page in the latest version of this document. So that I just took one that fits pretty well on the screen. So this is just talking about you know, so you can see there's an overall statement about what the skill looks like. And then there's sort of these sort of key statements that describe what the skill is in a little bit more detail. Key practice challenges, you know, kind of what are the key types of situations that might make this difficult, and then some challenges that happen when the peer support is kind of outside of that one-on-one relationship with a young person. And so I guess at this point, I just wanted to see, we had circulated this to our panel to see whether there are any comments about this, and maybe then just to wrap it up with any observations from the participants in the webinar, whoever's left. So yeah, anybody feel like saying anything?
I can go. What I find myself thinking when reading, you know, over all these different skills and challenges, you know, is that often someone comes into the peer support role with just a 40-hour training. And I know for myself, I didn't have any, you know, previous experience. And yet these are things that peer supports are expected to know and practice at the beginning of their work. And that seems pretty difficult, if not nearly impossible. And so I think it really just talks to the importance of ongoing training and support for peer supports to continue to be successful in their role.
Yeah, I would just like to add too that some of these, a lot of, I feel like the skills and challenges, or something that came up quite a bit was about having these like good reflective listening skills. And I think that when I was working as a peer, I actually really struggled with that. And it wasn't until I started working for a crisis line that I learned really how do you have like an empathetic and like supportive conversation where you're not giving somebody advice, you're not, you know, and at the time I really, once I learned these skills and was able to put these things into practice, I thought of like how helpful that would have been to have as a peer. Not that saying that like I was not a good peer support specialist, but having some type of framework and actual training around that would have been so helpful. And so I think that a lot of this work highlights, that's just one example of how these things that I didn't necessarily realize as a peer at the time were huge challenges for me and the importance of integrating this into trainings for peers specifically.
Yeah, I do want to say that the active listening skills was the most enthusiastically endorsed as most important skill in total of our participants.
I'm going to do what I do when I'm not calling in on the phone. And part of this power hour is really to connect and engage staff and system partners with this work. And so I'm just going to put two folks on the spot. First, I'd really love to hear your thoughts, Shauna, and I'm glad that you're here in this space and just to introduce yourself. And you were just a bright, wonderful human being. So it's always good to see your face. And then after Shauna, I'm going to be putting Bo on the spot as well, as our lead, our wonderful lead in the Office of Recovery and Resilience, who really has a lot of experience and subject matter expertise in the peer work. So Shauna, take it away. And then Bo, sorry for putting you on the spot, but connecting to this work.
Yeah, thank you, Nakobe. I was so glad to be able to join. I did not join when you first started. I came on about 4:45, but I have been able to listen to some of this, and you probably missed some of the earlier context. But Shauna McDermott, she, her pronouns. I'm the interim director for our health systems division, which includes our amazing, amazing people over in Beaver Health who are on this call. And you know, it's interesting. My background before coming to the Oregon Health Authority was with Kaiser Permanente, where I did a lot of care experience work. And in particular, when I was in Northern California, I had the opportunity to work within the context of our, I'm not clinical, but within the context of our nursing folks who many, you know, go into that practice from a place of feeling, wanting to be in service to others and really have a caring, healing ethic in terms of how they want to do their work. And so there was a lot of work we did within this framework of caring science. And I was just really appreciating how much was resonating with some of the things that I was hearing you say, Janet, and you, Nakobe, in terms of the, you know, everyone deserves to be seen, heard, and understood. And from a place where you're in relationship, and as a Native woman, like in right relationship, right? So that there is a sense of belonging, there is a sense of having individual power, but power is always a shared dynamic. So it's always a power with, and so in that is belonging because you're part of a we. And where the wellness, you know, dissipates and falters and crumbles is when we don't show up for each other in relationships. So I just really struck by how much each of you were sharing. And I think it might have been Michael, I was hearing you share too, just like that balance of, you know, when you're in right relationship, right, you're not over power, you're not doing power over in telling your story to be relevant, you're doing power with by helping reflect somebody in what they might need or what they might just need reflected back to them by being fully present. And sometimes being fully present is a little bit of your story that gives enough of that shared vulnerability and to know that you're not alone, and therefore there's a sense of belonging to something bigger. So just really appreciating the real nuance and the subtleties of the gifts that you're seeking to share with one another and to learn from each other. And yeah, just appreciate being a fly on the wall, Nakobe. So thank you.
Thank you so much for those reflections. Bo, I would love to put you on the spot if you're here. Again, an incredible peer leader and someone who I have learned so much from in the time I've been at Oregon Health Authority, who has expanded my understanding of peer work even. And I think I can speak for my team on that. So Bo, I'd love to hear your reflections.
Yeah, hey everybody. And it's just after 5, so I'm outdoors. And as you can see, I've took off my shirt too from the last time that I shared in the beginning of the meeting. But you know, I think, and I'm hoping my phone doesn't die, so apologies if it does. But you know, I really appreciate this space, and I appreciate you know, I think developing meaningful connection through shared lived experience. And going back to what I was saying at the beginning of the meeting, you know, being a person with lived experience. So, and living experience, I use the term living experience a lot. So for me, what that means is I identify as being in long-term recovery. And then I also currently experience very heightened states of emotion, and at times have to navigate realities that others are perceiving differently. And in my traditional culture, that was a very honored thing. Descendant of the Klamath tribes, and my dad's from Peru. And so I would just reflect back to the resilience and reflecting back on who I am in my relationship to community and to others, and having kind of you know, especially the aspect about active listening that we were talking about, empathetic listening, you know, and that's a skill that's lost in dominant culture, and that's really the thing to lead with. and to kind of engage in this resiliency work. So finding, understanding for me, understanding, having support around understanding what my role as a peer support worker was and being supported in that, and then being able to find identity in my profession and in my community and understanding my place, and essentially being able to define what peer support means to me. What's my relationship to it relative to my community, and relative to myself, relative to my specific family, relative to my connections. And that's what I really try to carry on is my work now too, is what's my relationship to it, and understanding that others have their relationship to it. And every milestone I have in my recovery over the years, there's always these buzzwords. Nakobe knows about this a lot. And for a long time, it was relevance. Another time was safety. That was a huge buzzword in my recovery process, my resilience process. Lately, I've been thinking that the one recently for me is resilience. And we've been working on that in our team a lot because we are the Office of Recovery and resilience. And so finding strength in our historical context and our historical relevance and our successes, and the successes I've found through my lived experience. Like I was saying earlier, a lot of times when we're advocating, people they'll loop us in as the voice of lived experience, and they'll want to hear about our negative experiences or the negative impacts the system had on us. And very rarely do we get asked about the positive aspects of our recovery and our resilience. How much deeper ingrained a sense of value system, a sense of meaningful connection through shared lived experience, and ability to listen, and ability to practice empathy that we develop through our lived experience. And so really trying to bring the focus back onto that aspect of my lived experience, and trying to reiterate that and show others that healing is possible. It is possible. And in fact, in my life today, my lived experience is more grounded in success and healing, and than it is in the negative impacts of the system on my life. And so trying to change the system and the peer work from a lens of appreciative inquiry, from a lens of hope and connection. So those are my thoughts. I'll be quiet there. Thanks, Nakobe, for letting me talk a little bit more.
Yeah, sorry, my dog is barking in the background. One sec.
No, Mona.
All right.
I just wanted to say, at the state, like now working at the state level, I appreciate being able to put peer work and the peer experience, the way that you've translated it into data. And I think that is something that is not
Yes, agreed.
seen.
Agreed. Thank you.
And yeah, and it's very important, not only for our work in our office, but also for the peer run organizations, and for being able to collaborate across the agency with understanding this community ask, but being able to also have the data to back it up, to be able to utilize these peer terms and these experiences, and also apply it to practice points, to background data, through research, through being able to have that. I know that we put the longer paper, the watermarked paper, in the chat, but I was going to say, I have not met one person other than you, Janet, who has taken the time to really not only engage youth who have utilized peer support specialists, peer supervisors, even now keeping into contact with these peers who have moved on to different positions. But that data piece is so strong. And I think that it's something that really helps support the work and the understanding of what peer support is for folks who may not come from a peer background, but still are so, it's all interconnected and are still so here to support the work, but are able to understand it in a way that is written in this text format. Definitely, like I had said earlier, going from research mode to peer mode and separating that was very different. If you ask me about my peer experience as a researcher in Oregon, it would be a very different conversation than my peer experience as a person, and experiencing that bodily and in terms of connection. So I think that having data and publications around this is so profound. And so I just want to thank you for that, and also continue to support uplifting this research and continuing to help spread that knowledge. And just, again, thank you for supporting us. And that research really helps us all grow and us all understand in the ways that each one of us processes information and is able to carry that out to their individual networks and teams. So I kind of wanted to end my spiel on that note. And again, thank you for presenting and being here and the work that you've done alongside all of us.
Yes. I just wanted to say again, just thank you, Janet. Like, I remember being in my junior year and engaging with this, and I remember being in my policy classes, and I was doing the work, and I was kept asking people, like I would ask because my policy professor was also a research professor, and I would ask these questions, like trying to connect all the dots, and they were just like, slow down, Kendall. You'll get there next year. And then I like did, and here I am, right? And it's like all the dots were connected. It's like, oh. And so with that added kind of layer of like now knowledge around research, and I just want to say, like, you didn't cause us harm in that process, and in no way did I feel that it was extractive, that I was being like studied. Like, this was very much so, you know, maybe not like to fidelity community-based participatory research, but the core values, which are very similar to peer values, were there, and they were operationalized really well and throughout the process. And I just want to name that and just say, yeah, thank you, because it was a validating space. And part of me is like, this publication means so much because it speaks to our experiences. And this is now like something, a platform that we get to continue to collaborate on and build on and continue to expand this much needed body of work, especially for our youth and our next generation in Oregon. So thank you.
Well, before we go, I want to thank all of you again for being a part of this panel and also for being part of the research. I often feel like my career has been taking the wisdom of other people and trying to put it into a form that academics will respond to. So I feel like that was very true in this case. So I don't know, Nakobe, if you have any parting words. I think we're kind of at the end, and yeah.
Parting words,
Yeah.
if you would like to at least drop in the chat, or we can also have it via email, a way for folks to contact you or get in touch with you I've definitely sent, I sent to at least the folks in HSD leadership the copy of your paper. And so whatever you would like in terms of contact or follow up, please let me know. I mean, you're going to see me often. So I just wanted to say thank you for being here. Thank you for changing so many lives. I know even the peer support specialists who are still peer support specialists or maybe have moved on. Just again, echoing Kendall, to the research process, I know is a lot. It's a lot, and a lot goes into the writing and everything. And so that's huge in one aspect, but also in being able to take our experiences, not cause harm, and have this be something that when we talk about it, even just amongst ourselves, Kendall and I, it was a process that filled. And so many times there are feeling researched like a study case can be so extractive. And you and the team really poured into us and allowed us to pour into one another, and also provide a way and a means of communication that broadens what peer support means and how it is understood by others. And so just another great thanks. And I hope that we can continue following this and finding more ways to expand this platform for the work that you've done. And again, Shannon and Sarah, you all are like what makes this happen. You all are just the bread and butter. So I appreciate you both infinitely. And Janet, I appreciate you infinitely. And just thank you. Thank you for being here, and thank you for having this presentation today. It's an honor. It's an honor to know y'all and to be in this time in history and space with you. That's all I got.
Thank you all.
Yeah, bye everyone.
Bye. Thank you.